Hello, year two. Welcome back to the last lesson of week 3. This is lesson 3, week 3. So we're looking at the lives of the nurses after the war. Now, this is going to be a big information session, okay, because it's the last session that we're looking at for the week. So make sure you're listening really carefully, and we've got a really nice activity afterwards. So make sure you've got your pen and your paper ready, and let's get straight into it. So, the Crimean War. The war is finally over. The fall of Sevastopol was the ending of the war. Sevastopol was the city inside the Crimea area, the Crimean Peninsula, and it was the main city that the Russian army were holding. The Russian army knew that they were going to lose, so they asked for peace. So they asked the Allies, which was the British, the French, and the Ottoman Empire. We're going to look at those and everyone that was involved in the Crimean War in a couple of weeks' time. But for now, that's all you need to know. Both women had very different lives after the war. Now, when I say both women, I mean Florence Nightingale and Mary Seacole. They both lived very different lives after the war. And it's interesting how they were both treated slightly differently. So, let's have a look at Florence Nightingale. Well, Florence returned after the war as a national heroine. Now, a heroine is a hero, but for a woman. And she had been shook by the conditions in the hospital, and she began to campaign on how to improve the quality of nursing in military hospitals. So she was saying she was so surprised about how horrible the hospital was when she arrived there. She needed to make sure that she never ever saw anything like that again, or nobody else had to deal with that. So she was campaigning, which means she wanted to improve the hospitals for military, which is for the army. She'd also gathered a lot of information about the food, the death rates, and the doctors training in these hospitals. So she collected a lot of information. She made lots of notes while she was out there. In October 1856, she met Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. And in 1857, she gave some evidence to the Sanitary Commission, which is a place that collects information about hygiene. And this helped setting up the Army Medical College in Chatham in 1859. So she managed to change something. That's why she's significant, because she managed to collect all this information and she managed to make changes on how medical hospitals for the army are done now. In 1859, she published a book called Notes on Nursing, which is still printed today. So you can still buy this book today. She also founded the Nightingale School and a home for nurses at St. Thomas's Hospital in London. So she set up areas in a hospital where they would be training, and they'd let nurses board so that they could make a new generation of nurses, so that they could train lots of new younger women to be nurses. All the way up until she died, Florence had encouraged the development in nursing in and around Britain. So she was saying that all the way up until she was right on her deathbed, she was saying that it's so important for you to keep washing your hands and keep your hygiene good. The main reason that we remember her is that she had such a lasting effect on the importance of keeping the hospitals clean and free from infections. This work of keeping the hospital clean and sanitary is still carried on today in today's NHS hospitals. She also became the first female member of the Royal Statistical Society in 1858. She was very, very good with numbers, Florence Nightingale, and she made a lot of pie charts, and she made a lot of statistical data. And she was the first woman to join a very prestigious society of mathematicians. And finally, in 1907, Florence became the first woman to receive the Order of Merit, an award given by the Queen for some super special work. So you have to be someone very significant to even be considered for this Order of Merit. And Florence Nightingale had proven that she has done such a fantastic job that she deserves to get the Order of Merit for how she changed the hospitals and how she changed sanitary. Now, this is what the Order of Merit looks like. You can see it's got like the royal crown on top, and it says for merit in the middle. And these are not given out to anyone. You have to be someone very significant to even be considered for this. Let's have a think about Mary Seacole then. When Sevastopol fell, She had promised herself that she would be the first lady to walk through the city. And she was. She paraded through the city where there had been fighting for over 11 months straight. And the British soldiers stood there and applauded her as she went through on horse. They cheered for their mother Seacole. She'd made such an effect on those British soldiers. She realised that there was nothing more for her in Sevastopol, and the war was over, so she decided that it was time to leave. But she wasn't able to sell the British hotel. The British hotel was in what was now ended war zone. Nobody else wanted to buy it off her. So she tried, and then that was it. She had just had to leave it there. So she left it, and she went on a boat, and she went home. She had to just leave it. All of her money had gone into that. She wasn't worried. She got back to England, she heard about how Florence Nightingale was a heroine. However, there wasn't a lot of fuss about Mary. The British people seemed to have moved on. It's as if they'd forgotten about everything that she'd done. So she was broke, poor, not even enough money to live somewhere nice. She was living in the same conditions that she'd been in war, but she was now in London, and she wasn't sure what to do. She tried to get some jobs to try and get some money, but nobody would employ her. They didn't need her, even though she was really a hidden heroine. It was one of the worst points in her life. She felt that everything that she'd done in the Crimea was for a waste because nobody had given her any sort of recognition for the good work that she'd done. Then she had a visitor come and see her. It was Mr. William Russell, the reporter, the journalist from the Times newspaper. He hadn't forgotten. He remembered travelling all the way over to the Crimea to see Mrs. Seacole and to see how fantastic her work was. And when he got back, he'd written a paper about her, but by then, when she got back, the paper had long gone. It wasn't new news. No one was bothered. William Russell couldn't stand for this, so he contacted all of his well-respected friends and contacts. And before long, there was a ceremony that was put on for Mother Seacole, and over 80,000 people went, and they stood there for Mary, and they cheered. And even Queen Victoria had written a letter thanking her for her service because she'd realised that there was so many people that had benefited and that had been saved by Mary. So in the end, she was actually appreciated. She went on to write a book, and that book can be still found today as well. So we remember them. On the left here, you can see this is Florence Nightingale, and on the right, this is Mary Seacole. These are both statues that are in London, and this is our appreciation to show that we remember them for all the hard work that they've done for us during the Crimean War, because things might be very different today if they weren't there. So Year 2, your task today, I'd like you to write a letter to either one or both of these famous nurses, and I need you to tell them how thankful you are for all their work. You can use some of the examples that we've learnt in lessons to help you on writing the letter about what they've done that you're thankful for. But just thinking about how Florence Nightingale has changed the nursing that we do today with how cleanliness is in hospitals. And Mary Seacole has changed how we do nursing today because of how much of a carer she was, along with Florence Nightingale. We're going to write about how fantastic these women are, and as if we're writing to them, saying thank you. I'm going to show you an example now of how to start your letter, and then you can continue it. We want to be posting this to Tapestry, so thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this lesson. I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye. Okay, so I'm going to start off my letter by saying the address, the sender's address. So I've got the Langley Academy Primary. So this is my address that I'm going to be using on Langley Road, Langley, and then the postcode, which is SL37EF.
Okay, now I need to do the date. So today's date of when this video will go out will be the 8th of May 2020. And then I'm going to put the first greeting part. So I'm going to put dear. So dear. Now this is where you can choose to write Mrs. Seacole or Mrs. Nightingale. So you can choose to write either of those. So let's say I'm going to write my letter to Dear Mrs. Seacole. Capital letter for Seacole. Then I'm going to do a comma. And then I need to explain why I'm writing the letter. So I am writing this letter to you using my finger spaces and my cursive writing, this letter to you because I wanted to thank you for all the amazing work you did during the Crimean War. Crimea needs a capital K. Crimean. That's K-R-I-M-E-A-N. C-R-I-M-E-A-N. Crimean War. Full stop. I now need to tell them why I'm really appreciative of their work. So I really appreciate, that means I really am thankful, I really appreciate everything you did, especially when you, and this is where you can tell me some of the things that you've learnt about whoever you're writing your letter to. So I know Mrs. Seacole, Mary Seacole, she treated people on both sides of the war, which means she wasn't bothered about whether you were Russian or whether you were from the Allies. It didn't matter, you needed your medical help. So I really appreciate everything you did, especially when you treated any soldier no matter their nationality. And that means no matter where they're from. Full stop. So this is where I've got to so far. Just move you up a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next point and say you could add a couple of extra points in about anything else that you feel you're really appreciative of. But the next part is to say if you want to extend yourself, what would happen if they didn't do the work? So you would start your sentence by saying, if you hadn't helped during the Crimean War, ... What do you think would have happened? Now, if you're writing for Florence Nightingale, you could have said, the hospitals today wouldn't be that clean. If you're writing about Mary Seacole, you might say, the care we get in hospitals today might not have been the same. Something like that. And then you want to continue that sentence on, and you need now a conclusion after that point. Your conclusion is just to say, thank you again for everything you have done. You are an inspiration. And then, how do we end our letters off? Can we remember? Have a think. If you're thinking, yours sincerely, comma, and then your name. So I'm going to go Mr. Watkiss. And that's it. That's my letter. So I'm now ready to fold that up. And then I can put it in an envelope as if I'm going to send it. I hope you've enjoyed this session. Make sure you refer to Tapestry so you can post all your work.